I pulled back my fist and I just let it rip. And the kid's nose exploded like a water balloon full of ketchup. I was completely shocked because I'd never really punched anyone in the face before, let alone punch somebody in the face so hard that they would start bleeding immediately. And I'm pretty sure I had just broken Justin McKenzie's nose. You know, we were all out there in front of the middle school waiting for the late bus to take us home, and some of the other kids had goaded me into throwing an ice ball at Justin, and so I just went with it and did it. Now you might be wondering, why did I even throw the ice ball at Justin? And well, it's kind of complicated, you see. In our 8th grade class, Justin and I were both the fat kids. You know, like the 2 fat kids. And I mean, in terms of our relative fatness, it was kind of more or less equal. But I always felt like I had to distinguish myself from Justin because he was the poor fat kid and I was the smart fat kid. Those factors made me better than him. You see, Tyler Kinnerson had said to me,
"Hey, you should throw some ice at Justin. That would be pretty funny."
And since I wanted to impress Tyler and have him think I was cool, I found the biggest ice chunk I could and I just hucked it right at Justin. And mind you, Justin had a really rough lot in life. You know, as I said, his family didn't have a lot of money. He had moved around a lot. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but he had some real, like, home difficulties that my friends and I just kind of laughed at because we just thought it made him different. And because I wanted to be a cool kid and I wanted to impress Tyler and his friends, I just went with it and I threw that ice ball at Justin. When the ice ball hit Justin in the face,
"Hey, who threw that?"
And the moment that he looked to see where that ice ball came from, Tyler and the other kids started to point at me and say that I threw it. And so Justin just kind of ran up to me and got into my face and he gave me a shove. And as soon as he gave me that shove, Tyler said to me,
"Wow, Morgan, are you just gonna let him push you around like that?"
And hell no, I wasn't gonna let him just push me around like that. So I pulled back my fist and I just punched him square in the nose. I immediately knew that I had broken that poor kid's nose. And also, as I punched him, I had this immediate moment of clarity, realizing that I had been goaded into this like I was a little puppet for the amusement of Tyler and the other kids.
You take your hand out the puppet's butt, man!
Justin fell to the ground and began crying about his nose. All the other kids stepped back and looked shocked. And apparently, about 50 feet away, Mr. Bunsen, who was my guidance counselor, saw this, ran up to us, and immediately told me to go inside to the principal's office. Yeah, I was in some deep and deservedly so. And that was how I became the only Jew in Catholic school. This entire story is true as I remember it. I've changed most of the names in this story for reasons that will become very obvious in just a few moments. This isn't a story that kids should watch, but it's probably really important that folks 12 years old and up watch. And as a content warning for folks, there is anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, sexual assault, and a lot of people being bad to each other. Watch at your own discretion. When my dad picked me up from school, we didn't talk the entire car ride home. And when I got home, I just stayed in my room until after dinner, and my mom had come home. And both my mom and my dad called me down from my room.
We need to talk.
I think it was like January of my 8th grade year at that point, and it had been a rocky few months. I was getting in trouble in school a lot. I was fighting with my parents a lot. I was fighting with my sister a lot. I had developed a half a pack a day smoking habit. I was beginning to experiment with weed. And even though I had traditionally been a very good student in school and was always in the advanced classes, my grades were starting to tank. And overall, things were not looking all that good. And on top of all of that, my parents were fighting a lot at the time. And probably about a year later, they'd end up getting divorced. I was like a textbook example of a 13-year-old kid in turmoil. And I'm pretty sure that breaking Justin's nose was the last straw for my parents.
You've had far too much freedom for far too long. You've been screwing up, getting in trouble, and we're really, really worried about you. I'm worried that if you keep on this track, you're gonna end up in jail or worse. We've got to think about your future. And so that's why, for high school next year, you're not gonna go to public school with your friends. We're going to send you to Catholic school.
The idea of having to go to a religious school was absolutely terrifying for me because I was a kid who was raised without religion. You see, my mother, with an Italian father and an Irish mother, was as prototypical Catholic as you could get, and my father descended from a long line of Eastern European Jews. That mixed religious background had really made it so that as a kid growing up, my sister and I were both raised without any strong ties to religion. Like, we would celebrate both Christmas and Hanukkah.
Happy secular holidays.
And even though I was 13 years old, there were many major religious milestones I had never achieved. By that point in my life, I could count on a single hand the number of times that I had been in a church or synagogue for a religious service, and each of those times either occurred for a wedding or a funeral. And so it wasn't that I didn't have a belief in a higher power or a God, it was just never something that factored into my life. I even remember being like a little kid, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, and my mother telling me the story of Adam and Eve. And I just interpreted her telling of that story much like, I don't know, Hansel or Gretel or the story of Santa Claus. And so the idea that I was not going to go with my friends to high school and I was going to have to go to a different high school and not have any friends whatsoever, that was absolutely terrifying to me. But then the fact that it was going to be a religious school that I was going to have to go to, that right there was horrifying. At that moment, sitting there in my parents' living room, I would have done absolutely anything not to have to go to Catholic school.
Boner clothing?
Boehners. It's pronounced Boehners. This is the place that sells the school uniforms.
Why do I have to go to a school that makes me dress like a businessman? This is so stupid.
Look, your behavior put you in this situation. The sooner you accept that, the faster you're going to adapt to it. Now, do you want me to come in with you for your fitting, or can you do it yourself?
No, Mom, I'm fine. I can do it.
Can I help you, son?
Yeah, I need to get uniforms for my high school.
Oh, you're going to be a dove. How wonderful.
A dove?
Yes, a dove. Central Catholic High School's mascot is the dove. Did you not know that?
I guess not.
Well, come over here and I will get you fitted for a blazer and slacks. My, you are a portly boy. A portly boy will require a portly-sized blazer. Luckily, we still have a few of those in stock. Now let's check your pant size. 42 inches? I can tell you really like your snacks, my boy. Now we're gonna check your inseam.
That first day at Central Catholic High School was really challenging for me because I walked into a situation where I knew absolutely nobody. Starting high school in 9th grade is this age where you are really trying to find your identity as a person and figure out who you are. And given that I was basically starting with a clean slate at a brand new school where nobody really knew me, I kind of felt like I had a chance to do that myself. Like, for example, the first few days of my freshman year of high school, I tried out for the football team. You know, I was a bigger kid, and so it seemed like I could be a fit for something like that.
So, Gold, are you able to practice on Saturdays? I heard that your people don't do practice on Saturdays. Also, lay off of the eclairs.
So I quit football pretty gosh darn quick. And after I quit football, I pretty much realized that I am who I am, and I just gravitated towards my weirdo ways of being a kid who was really into comic books, punk rock music, and
Carl Hungus.
My name is Carl, ich bin expert.
You must be here to fix the cable.
The 90s were a hell of a time to be alive.
And the reality is, an identity like that is never going to make you Mr. Popular in high school. But shortly after starting, I noticed that there was another dimension that was making me stick out and not quite fit in. And that situation started on my first day of school during 3rd period when the intercom buzzed.
Please pause before the start of the 3rd period. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for our school community. Guide us in wisdom and love. Bless all here on this first day at Central Catholic High School, and help us to be like our mascot, the doves, symbols of peace, hope, and God's love. We offer our efforts to you and ask for your grace to accompany us today. May we serve you and each other in all that we do. Amen. You may now begin your third period class.
Yes, that's right. Every day in school during third period, we would all stop before the start of the third period class, and somebody would get on the intercom and lead the entire school in some sort of prayer. And usually these ended up being very benign token gestures than a real sign of religious devotion. There was this one particularly legendary third period prayer where Jack Luray, who is this kid who was in my class, got on the intercom to lead third period prayer. And he asked everybody to pray for Mrs. Benson to get razors for Christmas so that she could shave her beard. We all thought that was hysterical.
I didn't find it very funny. In fact, it hurt my feelings.
Jack ended up getting kicked out of school for that one. But on that first day of school, the reason I was really struggling with third period prayer was I was just generally uncomfortable with prayer overall. You know, like I said earlier, I hadn't had much experience with religion, and so a big public display of religion made me very uncomfortable. And what made me even more uncomfortable was the fact that some of the teachers at the school were religious people. Like, I mean, actual nuns. Like, they were nuns that would teach us in school. It wasn't that most of the teachers in school were nuns, but there were about a half dozen of them who were Sisters of Notre Dame. Now, nuns have traditionally played a role in Catholic education. You know, when my mom was a kid and she went to Catholic school, she would tell me that all of her teachers were nuns, and like the entire school system was based on having nuns. But by the time the 90s rolled around, nuns were a lot less common. And like I said, we only had about 5 or 6 nuns at the entire school. And the real crazy part is if you look at the number of nuns in the United States today, like, they're like a very dwindling number. And I genuinely wonder if there's going to be any nuns left in like 50 years. But much like the interactions with third period prayer, my interactions with the nuns were also awkward.
Gold? Is that a Jewish name?
But overall, in those first few weeks of school, I just felt like such an outsider, despite so desperately wanting to fit in.
Hey, Morgan.
Me?
Yeah, you. Come over here. We gotta show you something. Do you have a penny?
A penny? No, I don't.
Well, don't worry. We know you like pennies, so we've got some for you.
The older I've gotten in life, the more I've realized you're never going to make people like you by trying to impress them. And furthermore, you're never going to make people like you by putting up with their abuse. But there I was, a freshman in my Catholic high school, doing both of those things, all in the name of finding friendship and acceptance. When Joe Williams and some of the other cool kids started to stab me with plastic forks, I would just laugh it off and say, we were just playing around and we're all friends. And then when Joe started calling me Kike Boy, I mean, isn't it just like a clever nickname to have, right? Like all friends give their other friends nicknames, right? And mine just happened to be Kike Boy, right? My drive to be accepted and liked had me putting up with so much abuse. And I just always assumed that that was just part of the deal. Like if you want to have cool friends, you got to act cool around your friends. And sometimes that might mean that they stab you with plastic forks or give you anti-Semitic nicknames. And you might think that going to a school where everybody wore a uniform that looked exactly the same would potentially limit the number of differences that kids would cite amongst each other. But at least compared to my middle school experience in public school, it was much more vicious. Any minute difference or particular detail that one kid had from the rest of the class would inevitably be used as a tool for bullying or belittlement. And I wasn't just a victim in that situation, I was arguably becoming one of the biggest perpetrators. You see, as a defense mechanism against the bullying I was facing, I would often turn my attention and anger towards other kids. Like, for example, the diversity of the student body of my high school was not. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it was like 90% white. And one of the few black kids in our class we nicknamed OJ. Yes, as in OJ Simpson. Yes, back in 1994, during the height of OJ mania, while the trial was going on, we decided to name this one kid, who was generally a really nice and mild-mannered kid, after a disgraced sports star who was accused of murdering his wife and another person, because we all said he kind of looked like OJ Simpson. You know, like he was black. And we were tossing around homophobic slurs like they were stolen communion wafers. I look back on all of this behavior and I am absolutely shocked and horrified that that was stuff that I did personally. And to this day, my instinct is to want to like reach out to those kids and like apologize to all of them. But then I worry that if I were to go out and do that, I would only resurface the trauma and make things even worse for them, all in the name of assuaging my own guilt. But I will say that if I was a horrible human being to you in high school and you're watching this video now, just know that I'd like to say that to every single one of you, I'm horribly sorry. And feel like there is no excuse for what I did or what I said, and human beings deserve to be treated better. And to this very day, I'm still haunted by my horrible actions. And just because I was facing bullying and anti-Semitism doesn't make my racism and my bullying any better either. And in fact, in my opinion, it makes it much, much worse.
So if you're Jewish, right, is that like your religion, or is that your race, or is it your nationality? Are you from Israel? Is it like a cultural thing? Like, what is being Jewish?
I don't know. I just know that my dad's Jewish and my grandparents are too.
Now, I do want to say that the fact that my father was Jewish and I was of Jewish descent was one of the reasons I was bullied in high school, but it was not the primary nor the exclusive reason I was bullied. But now I think for me personally, it bothered me a lot more than other reasons because I was getting bullied for something that I didn't even feel like was connected to my identity at all. Like I said, I was raised in an entirely non-religious household. And the fact that some kids were making that a big part of my identity, when I didn't even know what that meant in the first place, that was a really hard pill for me to swallow. Every student was required to take religious classes every single semester, every single year. And that actually forced me to have to learn about the ins and outs of Christianity. Christianity is just the Frasier spinoff to Judaism's Cheers. And so right out of the gate, as I started in high school, I was beginning to read the Bible for the very first time. Hey, knock it off, you two. So throughout high school, one of my favorite teachers was Mr. Presley. He was one of the religion teachers, but he was like the cool religious teacher. You know, one of the religion teachers was a nun. Another one was this really surly deacon. But Mr. Presley, he was cool. He was younger than the other teachers. He actually went to Central Catholic High School as a student himself about 15 years earlier. And he just had this way about him that was really relaxed and easy and not all that self-important. And that made me feel very comfortable with him. And that also made me open up to him a little bit.
Morgan, your passion in our debates during class is admirable, but I can't help but notice that you challenge concepts that you've never fully explored.
What do you mean?
You question and challenge the Bible, but have you actually ever read the Bible?
No.
Have you ever considered that understanding the depth of what you're questioning can change the nature of a debate? I challenge you to read the Bible. All of it. Understand its narratives, its lessons, and then let's have a debate when you're fully equipped.
Okay, you're on, Mr. Presley.
Morgan, this journey might surprise you in ways you don't even expect.
Mr. Presley's challenge to read the Bible was one that actually really got inside my brain. Because here I was trying to object to everything about Christianity, trying to sit in religious classes and disprove the existence of God, And meanwhile, I'd never actually read the foundational text from cover to cover. And so with Mr. Presley's challenge issued, I just got to work.
So you want to know what happens in the Bible? Okay, I'll tell you. It all starts off with the Old Testament, which is like a family drama mixed with a disaster flick. First off, God's whipping up everything in 6 days. Boom, light. Bam, land. Pow, people. And then he's just like, just don't touch that one tree over there. But of course, Adam and Eve, first thing they do is eat the fruit of the tree. Can't resist it. First rule ever, and they break it. Classic humans. Then it's just non-stop action. Noah's building an ark because people can't play nice. Abraham's starting a family that could fill a stadium. And Joseph's living out the worst ever case of sibling rivalry turned into Egyptian soap opera and fashion show. Fast forward, and Moses is parting the seas and laying down laws, while everyone's wandering the desert for 40 years because apparently nobody could follow directions. And just when you think it's all about smiting and wandering, we hit Leviticus, where God turns into the health inspector, laying down rules like no mixing fabrics and definitely no shellfish. Fast forward, and we got this whirlwind tour through history. Joshua, Judges, making quick work of conquering the promised land. It's like a divine game of capture the flag, but there's more smiting and less sportsmanship. Jumping to the monarchy with Saul and David and Solomon, that's where things have less wandering and more drama. More of a Crown/Game of Thrones with no dragons kind of vibe. David's the rock star king with a complicated love life, and Solomon's wisdom is kind of like, hey, let's not cut babies in half here, people. Through the prophets, it's all divine interventions and celestial warning shots. Isaiah, Jeremiah, these guys are like, turn back now or it's gonna get real. And let's not forget the minor prophets either. They're kind of like the minor Marvel movies, like the Ant-Mans or Eternals of the whole Bible thing. And then we get to the New Testament, and it's all about a rebrand. God sends Jesus, who's all about turning water into wine and preaching love and forgiveness. Jesus gathers a crew, tells stories, flips the script on the whole smiting thing, and how do all the good people thank him? Crucifixion. Yet he pulls off the ultimate comeback 3 days later. And the Bible likes this story so much they decided to tell it 4 different times in 4 different versions, but they opted to leave out Taylor's version. Then we read a bunch of letters from folks with a poor sense of clear writing, and then the whole thing ends with Revelations, where it's like the after credits scene for the end of the world. Fire, brimstone, 4 horsemen. It really is God's cliffhanger, leaving us all wondering, what's next for Bible Phase 3?
Fine. I'll do it myself.
You know, as far as books go, the Bible has about 600,000 words. That makes it longer than Moby Dick. That makes it longer than Lord of the Rings. That makes it even just a little bit longer than War and Peace. And to this day, I will say that there are some really good stories and ideas that get spelled out in both the Old Testament and the New Testament.
There's also some horrible ideas and advice inside the Bible.
And there were things that I really discovered as I went through that text. And it put a lot of our culture and our world in a different context for me. And so I do have to say that the experience of just digging in and actually reading the Bible was kind of transformational for me. Even though I have no certainty about the secrets of the universe and higher powers and forces greater than all of us here on Earth, I will generally classify myself as an atheist these days. I feel like I've studied enough of world religions to see that they're all just creations of humanity, and there's no way they could actually possibly truly capture the mysteries of the universe. I truly think that Christianity just benefited from being in the right place at the right time, and the fact that it's got proselytizing and virality built into the structure of the religion itself, that has made it such an organizing force for humanity for the past 2,000 years or so. But that's just like my personal opinion, and I fully accept that I just might be wrong. These days, I believe that if you practice a moral code that encourages you to treat other people right and leave the world in a place better than you found it, I don't think there's much more that you can ask of folks. But all of that said, I definitely appreciated the experience of reading the Bible, and in fact, I ended up doing it a second time my senior year, where I read it straight through again, just to kind of further glean and understand that text. And to this very day, roughly 30 years later, I'm still grateful to Mr. Presley for challenging me and my beliefs and actually getting me to read the Bible. Of course, a really sad and unfortunate footnote to that statement is, I don't know, I feel like I found this out about 10 years ago. Apparently, Mr. Presley ended up going to prison after I graduated high school because his wife caught him having sex with a 13-year-old girl.
All right, I did it. I read it cover to cover, and man, if I picked this up in a Borders bookstore, I'd have thought I stumbled on some wild sci-fi series.
And yet you read it all. What made you keep turning the pages?
Curiosity, I guess. But come on, Mr. Presley. Why is this book, of all the ancient texts, held up as the ultimate truth? Suppose history hadn't been filled with wars fought in its name, torture for its non-believers, and the indoctrination of children into its dogma. Would Christianity hold any power or belief today?
You're touching on deep, complex issues, Morgan. History is filled with people using beliefs for power, for better or worse. But the essence of faith in the Bible isn't about coercion or inheritance. It's about personal discovery and the relationship it builds, not just between a person and the divine, but among people as fellowship and community.
Personal discovery? In a book that talks about not wearing cotton polyester blends?
Think about the stories that you read as metaphors, lessons in resilience, forgiveness, compassion, and the struggle between good and evil. Yes, there are miraculous events that happen, but at its core, the Bible's all about humanity's journey, our flaws, and our potential for redemption.
As my time at Central Catholic High School went on, eventually I did in fact end up making some friends. And when you're a teenager and you have friends, you do start to find your way and your place in the world. And for me, I really felt like I started to come into my own my sophomore year of high school. And quite possibly the most exciting thing was I actually got a job my sophomore year. Ever since I was a kid, I was always into comic books and drawing my own comics. And a local newspaper gave me a job doing a weekly comic strip in their newspaper. It didn't like pay a lot or anything. I think I made like 20 bucks a comic strip, but it was much more the fact that I was finally getting my comics published and out there and people were gonna see them. Like for me at 15 years old, that was my dream and that was my aspiration, and it was finally coming true. And that first Wednesday when my first comic strip was gonna be published, I couldn't wait to get my hands on a physical copy of that comic strip. Now mind you, the newspaper I was going to be in wasn't going to be the Hartford Courant. It was a wee bit shadier than that. In fact, I actually went into the archive and I pulled out a couple old copies that I still have here. This free newspaper that they would give out, and it would feature like reviews of shows and ads for local businesses, as well as the fact that it was the place that you could find the ads for escort services and phone sex ads. But despite the shady nature of Bubkiss, which was the alternative news weekly I was appearing in, I, Morgan Gold, was actually a published cartoonist. That fall morning that first issue that I was appearing in Bubkiss appeared, that was my official start as a professional cartoonist. I had this comic strip that I had been drawing and self-publishing in zines for about a year or two called Stan Man Rabbit. It featured this cigarette-smoking, surly rabbit character, basically just a ripoff of Matt Groening's Life in Hell. Well, Bubkiss picked up the series and they started publishing my cartoons on the regular. Like for example, this issue has this cartoon where Stan Man Rabbit talks about why work is a bad idea. Yeah, I don't know. It's really funny to see it, and it's all kind of cringe at this point, given that I feel like I was a 15-year-old kid who still hadn't really worked a job in my life, and here I was opining on why work was bad. But just allow me to underscore for you how big a moment this was for teenage me. I wanted to show all the kids at school because somewhere deep down inside my soul, I assumed that if I could show them that I was a published cartoonist, maybe that would make me popular, and maybe that would make girls even want to go out with me. And so because of this fact, I concocted this harebrained scheme to sneak out of school, walk to this local diner called Chesben, which just so happened to be the closest place that would get copies dropped off Wednesday morning. And I would grab a bunch of copies of said newspapers and then pass them out to all the kids in school, and then they would see how cool I was, and then the girls would want to go out with me. And since I had a study hall period during fourth period, I decided that would be the perfect time for me to sneak out. This Ginny Barncat was a mission with a purpose. And so fourth period rolled around, I ditched out of my class, I went down staircase D and snuck out the back door. I walked into the woods. I walked down the hill. I walked around the corner. And I walked right into Chesben. There, right by the door of Chesben, they had a whole stack of fresh copies of Bubkiss. I proceeded to grab all but one copy of Bubkiss and take them with me. I went back up through the woods, back up around the hill, back through staircase D, which I had strategically wedged open with a piece of cardboard jammed inside the locking door mechanism so it wouldn't lock when it closed. And then as I was walking up the steps to staircase D, well, guess who was standing right there? It was my old arch nemesis, Sister Josephine.
Gold, what are you doing here? You do not belong over here.
Sister Josephine was one of my least favorite teachers at school, and that sophomore year, she was like constantly trying to bust my chops. She once gave me a detention for vulgarity. She once gave me a detention for not wearing socks. And here she had just discovered me clutching a stack of newspapers ready to sneak back into the school, and she knew something was up. Now, this is the part of the story where I should explain to you guys what the comic strip that week was all about, because I think that's an important detail that's relevant to the rest of the story. You see, I had drawn this comic strip about experts giving advice, and it had all of these panels that were a series of different experts giving really bad advice.
I'm Dr. Jensen, and I'm here to irrigate your bowel.
Now, you could probably make a fair case to say that that's kind of a hack premise for a comic strip.
The law says you're screwed. Now pay me $1,000.
Now, Sister saw me with this stack of newspapers and she asked me what it was. Realizing that I was already busted for leaving school grounds, I figured maybe I could get them to go easy on me if they found out that the reason I had left school grounds was because I, Morgan Gold, was now a published cartoonist. And maybe the fact that I was a published cartoonist would impress them and that would get me out of trouble. Well, sister, you see, I just had a comic strip published for the first time ever in this newspaper, and I'm now a published cartoonist. And I was so excited to find this newspaper that I figured it was worth skipping out from school. I know it was wrong. I am sorry. I am begging you for your forgiveness. Now, Sister looked at me and she was like, "You made a comic strip in this newspaper?" And as she said newspaper, she was clearly looking at the phone sex ad that was emblazoned on the back of that newspaper. She grabbed one of the copies from my hand and took a look at it. As she looked at it, her face went ashen white because she saw the last panel of that comic strip. And what did the last panel of that comic strip say?
Do you have a difficult question about love, sex, or marriage? Then come talk to a priest. We know all about sex. If you're a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I didn't really think that plea for leniency through all that well. Sister Josephine began shaking her head and clenching her teeth. She shut the newspaper and she looked at me and she said, "I think you need to go see Father Kerouac."
In the shadowed corridors of Central Catholic High School, where whispers echoed against stone walls and secrets lurked in every shadow, there walked a man cloaked not just in black, but in mystery. Father Kerouac. This wasn't your ordinary priest, mind you. This was a man who danced on the razor's edge between our world and the one that lies beyond, where darkness writhes and evil dwells. The Archdiocese of Hartford might deny it if you ask outright, but within these hallowed halls of Central Catholic High School, it was an open secret. Father Kerouac was an exorcist.
I cast you out! It is he who commands you!
Now let your imagination drift to a place of flickering candlelight and whispered incantations. Picture a man rumored to have inspired the very essence of terror in the Exorcist movie. Though rumors of his participation in the Exorcist film was merely folklore, the reality was no less chilling. Father Kerouac was intricately woven into the fabric of the supernatural. A trusted ally of Ed and Lorraine Warren, whose lives inspired the harrowing tales of the Amityville Horror and The Conjuring. This man, whose students often referred to simply as Father Sal, was the beacon the Warrens sought out when confronted with entities so malevolent that only a sacred touch could banish them back into the shadows. Beyond his dealings with the occult, Father Kerouac was also the headmaster of Central Catholic High School. So imagine the weight of the world pressing down upon you as Sister Josephine, with eyes as serious as the grave, informs you that you must meet with Father Kerouac immediately. A directive that would send a shiver down anyone's spine.
Now, Father Kerouac was always kind of a frightening figure at our school. You see, us kids didn't even see him around all that much. There was the vice principal, Mr. Jones, who you would see for normal disciplinary actions, and I was in his office darn near daily. And then there was Ms. Freud, who was the principal, and she was a former nun, and if you really did something bad, you'd have to go see her. But the only kids I ever knew who got sent to Father Kerouac's office, they got expelled. And as much as I didn't like going to Central Catholic High School, I was also terrified of expulsion. By that point, my parents had gotten divorced, but they were very much on a unified front that if I got kicked out of school, that was going to mean much, much worse consequences. Which, as I think about this now as a 44-year-old man, I'm trying to think of like what that was, and I can't even remember what those consequences were. Like, I wasn't going to get sent to military school. There were no other schools. My parents could barely afford to send me to this school. I don't actually, I guess I would have been grounded, but I don't even actually know what would have happened if I gotten kicked out of school. But regardless of that, at that point, as I was sitting on a bench outside Father Kerouac's office, I was shaking in my boots because I was terrified about what was going to come next.
Father Kerouac, we'll see you now.
Morgan, have a seat. I understand you've had a bit of an adventure today.
It's nothing. It's just a stupid comic that I drew.
I saw the comic. It's creative. But Morgan, leaving school grounds, skipping class? That's much more concerning to me.
Rock 102. 3 decades of classic rock, 3 times the variety.
I didn't know you were a Whalers fan.
More than a fan. I used to be the team's chaplain. Hockey and faith, my 2 guiding lights.
That's pretty cool. I didn't take you as a hockey guy.
We all have layers, Morgan.
Do you think Karmanos is going to move the team?
I sure hope not. The Whalers belong in Hartford. It's their place. Do you feel like Central Catholic is your place, Morgan?
Not really.
Morgan, did you ever hear the one about the gunslinger and the monk?
No, what does that have to do with anything?
Everything! See, this gunslinger, he's wandering through the desert, right? Comes across this old monk sitting in the middle of nowhere. The monk's just sitting there, sand as far as the eye can see. So the gunslinger, curious, asks the monk what he's doing out there in the middle of God's forgotten sandbox. The monk looks up, smiles, and says, "Making my place in the universe." The monk tells the gunslinger that it doesn't matter where you are. It's about what you do, the purpose you create for yourself in the chaos. That monk, he could have been anywhere, but he chose the desert to make his point. To build something from nothing.
So, am I supposed to be the monk in that story?
No, you're the gunslinger. You've got the whole world in front of you, endless possibilities. But you're wandering, looking for a place to belong. When really, you should be making your own place, crafting your own purpose with the tools you've got. Your wit, your art, your voice.
I don't always fit in, you know? It's hard when you feel like you're on the outside looking in.
Believe me, I understand. But fitting in isn't about changing who you are.
Is that even possible here for someone like me?
I believe it is, Morgan. You're here for a reason. Now, do you want to keep going to find that place where you belong? Well, you're getting 4 weeks of detention plus 2 Saturday detentions. And sometimes it's about believing in yourself, in the journey you're on.
So I'm not getting kicked out?
Not if you're willing to find your place.
Throughout my entire 4-year career at Central Catholic High School, I never once set foot in a confessional booth. And even to this day as an adult, I have never been inside confession or given my confession to a priest. That's an activity that's reserved for Catholics, and I'm not one of them. But I will say that there is some Catholic wisdom in that action, because there is a miraculous power in unburdening your soul in that way. And as I look back on myself and who I was and the person I was when I was in middle school and high school, I most certainly cringe and regret how horribly I treated so many people and just how dumb and appalling many of my actions were. And I might even wish that I had treated people differently and done things differently if I could go back in time. But the world doesn't work that way, and so it's not something I could do. But what I do feel like I have done over the course of time has been to learn from those mistakes and to try to grow from those mistakes. And because of that, it's kind of nice that you can't undo things. Because if you did undo things, you wouldn't be able to learn and take advantage of those lessons. And you might still be the same head you were 25 or 30 years ago. And in the time since I've left Central Catholic High School, I will say that I did try to go on, like Father Kerouac suggested, and find my place in the desert. Everywhere I've gone and everything I've done, I've tried my very best to make it my place. And the one thing that I do know with certainty is that trying is arguably the most important part. So thank you to everybody for listening. If you have sort of some questions, leave them down in the comments. I'll probably even add like a little footnote section down in the description of this video if you're looking for more details or for clarifications. If you got something out of this one though, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with other folks too. Thanks for watching, everybody.